Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. You may recently have seen or not bothered to watch my incredibly long 3-part book diary of reading Ductionary Berryport. While that was a really long and really difficult book to read, I really enjoyed the process of vlogging my reading of it as I was going along, so I decided I wanted to do more of that type of video, and I thought a great way to do that, to help me keep track of my thoughts, would be to do book diaries for the books we pick for the Space Sirens book club. So welcome to my book diary for Mexican Gothic. I was going to hold up the book, but I've actually taken the dust jacket off of it. So here is the cover. Here is the dust jacket. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Today is the 4th of August. The book discussion is on Saturday, the 8th. I actually can't make the live show for this one because I am very silly and double booked myself. I was meant to get a tattoo done in March and it got postponed due to lockdown, and so I rebooked it for Saturday and accidentally booked it at the same time as the live show. But I'm gonna try and be in the comments of that, or I certainly will watch it later if I don't manage to watch it at the time, and then from September onwards I'm hopefully going to be at all the live shows. Mexican Gothic, I started it last night. I had a bit of a saga of why it's taken me so long to get around to starting it. Originally I'd requested it from the library, but they only had it on order because it's a new release, and so I thought, well, you know, that will be plenty of time. I requested it at the end of June when we decided on it, or maybe right at the very beginning of July, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting for it to be available, and then last Thursday I think it was still saying on order, and I was the second person in line to reserve it. I was like, even if one of the copies, they had 3 copies on order, I was like, even if one of the copies comes in this weekend, like the chance of me actually having time to read it before the live show are very slim. So in the end I just ended up buying it on Amazon, which I'd been reluctant to do because it's a new release and it's hardback, so it was a bit pricey, but from what the others have said about this book I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like it, so I thought I'm just gonna bite the bullet and buy a copy. I've started it last night. I have read, I think, 2 chapters so far. Yeah, 2 chapters so far. I am enjoying it so far. I really like Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing style. I'm definitely getting Rebecca vibes, like Daphne du Maurier style of writing, the kind of gothic sense. I'll see how it develops. I think people do tend to describe it as being gothic horror, which is the only type of horror I can cope with. From the first 2 chapters, particularly the second chapter when she arrives at the house, her cousin's house, and starts to describe that, I was getting real Crimson Peak vibes. I don't know if you've seen that film. I mean, as I say, gothic horror is the only type of horror I can cope with, and I just about cope with that. My friend who I was watching it with really didn't like it. She doesn't like the way the ghosts were portrayed in that film, but that is the sort of vibe I'm getting from this book so far. It's my lunch break now. I would usually go for a walk on my lunch break, but I was doing some training up until a couple of minutes ago, so if I went for a walk now, by the time I would get back from the walk I'd be really hungry because I'm already quite hungry and I need to actually cook something for lunch today. So I've put some eggs on to cook. I'm going to read for a little bit while I'm on my lunch break, and then I'll try and read some more this evening as well, and I'll let you know how I go on. And I've just seen, has popped up on my WhatsApp, we're about to vote for our September book, like our initial round of voting, and then we'll put them, like usually the top 2 or 3 onto our Twitter feed, so soon you'll be able to vote for our September book, which is really exciting. So catch up with you again soon. Hi, so it's now the 6th of August. I know I've not been very good at updating so far with this book diary. That's because I've mainly been reading Mexican Gothic in bed and I keep falling asleep reading it, and that, I promise, is not a reflection on the book. It's just a comment on how tired I am at the moment. I keep waking up really early. Had a few days where I was really struggling to get to sleep still, but it seems to have evened itself out a little bit now, and I have been waking up and reading a little bit more in the mornings. So I'm now up to chapter 9. I've got up to chapter 9, so I'm just coming up for a third of the way through, I think. Still really enjoying it. I love the writing. It's written really beautifully. I really like the main character, Noemi. The premise is it's set sort of in the early part of the 20th century, maybe like 1920s. I'm not entirely sure. Noemi her father gets a letter from her cousin, who is fairly recently married and has gone to live in her husband's father's estate. They get a very confused letter from her where she says her husband is poisoning her. Noemi's father has been writing to Virgil, the husband,
and is not satisfied with the answers, so he decides to send Noemi there to find out what is going on. It very much has this kind of closed house mystery kind of vibe. The suspense factor, the thriller horror factor, I guess, is that you know something's not right, you know something's going to happen, and it's just that build up. So it's that kind of, it is Gothic horror, like the name Mexican Gothic kind of gives it away. At the moment it's reminding me most strongly actually of Victoria Holt's novels, which I really like, but I think it's a little bit darker than her books because she's more Gothic romance. So I'm really enjoying it. The point I've got to, Noemi is still trying to figure out, can she trust anyone in this house? It feels like most of the people there's Catalina, who's her cousin, and Virgil, who's Catalina's husband, and then his father Howard, who is a creepy old man. I think it must be aunt. I haven't quite figured out all the family relations. No, it must be his aunt Florence and her son Francis. And Francis is the only one that seems vaguely nice to Noemi. There's also a doctor who we don't entirely trust, who is their family physician. There's definitely something going on, and Noemi starts having these weird dreams as well. So it's building up this really good creepy atmosphere, and I'm definitely intrigued to see what happens. I'm probably going to read a little bit now. My other part of the problem is that I am reading way too many things at the same time again, so I'm behind on a buddy read, but this is the more urgent one, so I think I'm going to read some more of this now at bedtime, and I'm hopefully going to finish it. I would like to finish it tomorrow or maybe Saturday morning. The live show is on Saturday afternoon, even though I can't actually make the live show, but it'd be nice to finish it before then. Yeah, I'm going to read some more now, and I will hopefully update you again tomorrow. Hello, so it is Saturday morning now, the 8th of August. I'm just past halfway through the book. I read a little bit more yesterday, I've read a little bit more this morning. I am going to read some more now as well, but I just thought I'd give you a bit of an update on my thoughts. I think I'm going to try and keep these quite spoiler free, but I'm really emotionally invested in this book now. I generally prefer character driven books anyway, so I have to like and want to root for at least a couple of the characters, and I really like Noemi as a protagonist. I think she has the right balance of confidence and insecurity which I quite appreciate. Like, she knows what she is trying to achieve, but she doesn't know how to get there. Of the other characters, I quite like Francis, who is the cousin, and I want to know more about Catalina, who is Noemi's cousin. The family relationships in this book are a little bit confusing. I keep getting tripped up, and I think in my last update I said I thought it was set in the 20s. I think it's actually set a bit later in the 40s or 50s, but it's hard to pin it down. There's a lot of like troubled past, and I like that, like the family secrets. The Doyle family have a lot of secrets, and Noemi's gradually uncovering them all. A lot of this book is about mental health and the debate about whether Catalina is mentally ill or just physically ill. I don't know if it's too much of a spoiler to give a content warning at this point for attempted suicide, because that's what it seems has happened, but it's not entirely clear that the person knew that the thing would harm them in that way, if that makes sense. But then there was a discussion about whether they needed to see a psychiatrist or not, and another person saying they weren't sure they need a psychiatrist even though they've just said that she's attempted suicide. So I found that a bit weird. I know I'm being a bit vague because I don't want to be spoilery, but I want to give content warnings. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure about the representation of mental health, but I think it's because of the period it's set. Yeah, so I don't like most of the other characters, in the sense of I don't think you're meant to like them. They're a bit repressed and creepy, but that makes for a very gripping plot. So that's the point, isn't it? I've talked about like the sort of vibes I get from it, what it's similar to. I actually think the closest comparison is the film Crimson Peak, although that was really creepy. But just in the sense that Noemi keeps having these really vivid and quite weird and creepy dreams, and that was an element in Crimson Peak that isn't in some of the other stuff that I've mentioned as comparisons. So I'm really intrigued to see how this book turns out. I'm really invested in it. I want to try and finish it today. The live show is today. I don't know if I'll finish it before that, but then I'm not at that anyway, as I keep saying, because I'm useless and double booked myself. But I will have a nice new tattoo to show you this evening. So yay, that I will try and catch up on the live show, and I'll link to it as well so you can go back and watch that too. At the moment I can't see how this book is going to end at all happily, which I'm kind of okay with because that's the nature of the type of book it is. I mean, I'm hoping that there is at least some happiness at the end or it might be a bit broken, but never mind. I'm gonna go and get some breakfast and then I'm gonna keep reading.
Hello. I thought I'd set up my tripod so that you don't have to cope with shaky camera work for the last portion of this book diary, but I will apologise because it is a very hot day today, so I've got the windows open, I've got the fan on, so if you hear traffic noise and stuff like that, it's too hot to film otherwise. I finished Mexican Gothic. After my last update this morning, I started reading again, and the mystery element of the plot came to its reveal quite quickly after that, and then I just could not put the book down until I'd finished it. It was very compulsive reading after that point. I'm gonna put the cover on it because this cover is gorgeous and just really does sum up the vibe of the book as well. Also, I will apologise if I'm a bit snuffly. The pollen count is very high today and I am suffering from my hay fever. Yay. I do not like summer for this kind of reason. I don't like hot weather and I don't like hay fever, I don't like pollen. Anywho, back to the book. Trying to get my thoughts back into some sort of sensible order about this book because I did end up really, really loving it. In fact, I was enjoying it most of the way through. There were a few places where some of the more horror elements did bother me, but that's kind of what you expect with this type of novel. I've talked a little bit in some of the previous clips about some of the associations I was making when I was reading the book. There were certainly like old house mystery elements that reminded me a little bit of kind of an Agatha Christie or a Victoria Holt, maybe slightly more towards Victoria Holt end because she writes gothic mystery romances. But I think the strongest comparison I can make, and it's not in any way to reflect negatively on either of these things, but there were some elements that were quite similar. It reminded me a lot of the film Crimson Peak, just in terms of the atmosphere created, the slightly creepy family, the weird old house with secrets, and the way some of the more, maybe ghost isn't really the right word, but like Noemi ends up having some really vivid dreams in the story and she sees people from the family's past in those dreams, and that reminded me again of some of the ways the ghosts are portrayed in Crimson Peak. If you liked this book and you haven't seen that film, you probably will enjoy that because there are a lot of similarities, but like not in a, I don't want to say that in a way that will detract from the book because it's very different in a lot of ways as well. I talked a little bit about the characters. I don't want to go into too much detail about the plot because I don't want to give it away. I did work out some of what was happening. I mentioned in one clip about the discussion of mental health and how that was being portrayed, and what became clear quite soon afterwards was that it wasn't actually about mental health, it was about gaslighting and emotional manipulation and abuse. The way some of the characters were treated and were talked about made it seem like they were mentally ill when actually it was stuff to do with what was going on in the house that was making them act that way, and then other characters manipulating them to make them feel like they were going mad. That is definitely a content warning for domestic abuse, particularly in terms of emotional abuse, but there was also some domestic violence in there as well. Yeah, so I figured out that it was something to do, like, I don't want to give it away how to phrase it. I figured out what was causing some of the things that were happening in the story, and I'm not going to say what it was because it's quite integral to the plot, but I think I was helped in that by my enjoyment of Star Trek Discovery and the talk of the mycelial network in that. So if you've watched that, you'll know what I'm talking about, and hopefully that's not a spoiler. Well, I suppose it kind of is, but I felt very clever that I knew that that was what was going on. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. There were a few parts that did make me feel uncomfortable as I was reading it, and I was like, I haven't decided what rating to give it yet. I think it's probably going to be 5 stars, but there were some moments where I was like, oh, I'm really not enjoying this, and then I remembered it was because of the type of novel it is, and I'm not very good with horror stuff. So this is about as close to horror as you'll find me reading, because the outworking of this was definitely along the more fantastical line, more fantasy line. It's definitely spec fiction in that sense. The mystery central to this plot was magical, was not like a natural phenomenon. I did enjoy the ending. I thought the way the plot worked out, I was satisfied with that. I know some of my friends that have read it weren't entirely happy about the ending, but to me it worked. It was the kind of thing I was hoping for. I want to give a couple more content warnings. So there's quite a lot of violence in this book. There is attempted rape and other forms of sexual harassment, so a couple of the male characters talk in ways to the female characters that is not okay, but that is very clear in the text that the people on the receiving end of that are not happy about it, and it just sort of adds all to this gothic horror kind of context. There's also incest and cannibalism referred to, and references to stillbirths and miscarriages and death of children, and there's murder, and there's chronic illness, discussion of mental health, as I've mentioned. There is a lot of stuff in this book that you might find upsetting, so just be aware if you're going into it that it does deal with a lot of difficult topics. And I knew that going into it, so I knew what to expect, certainly in terms of that. I knew that, well, it's the genre, that it's kind of gothic horror genre, you know it's going to be dealing with some deep and troubling stuff. Just be aware of that if you're going into it. I really love Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing. She has very lyrical writing style, quite poetic in places. The descriptions were really evocative. Like, I don't have a very visual brain, but particularly the dream sequences that she described, I could picture it based on the way she described it, which is quite rare for me really, because my brain doesn't generally work in that way. So I really enjoyed that, and I really do want to go and read more that she's written. So very pleased to have finished this in time for the live show, which I can't attend anyway. I will put the link for that in the description, so if you don't manage to watch it live you can go back and catch up on it. I'm going to be trying to watch it live, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting a tattoo done, so whether I'll actually be able to, I'm not sure, but I will watch it later if not. So that's it for Mexican Gothic. I hope you've enjoyed watching this. Our next book, I'm really excited, it's actually arrived today. I wasn't expecting it to come quite yet. So for our August book we're reading The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I want to start it right away, but I'm not going to because I have so many books that I'm currently reading and I need to finish at least a couple of them, so I will probably be picking that up slightly later in the month, and I'm going to do a book diary for that as well. And if I have it, details about the live show for that will also be in the description box as well, so you can join us for that in probably at the start of September. So if you've read Mexican Gothic, I would love to know what you thought about it. Let me know down in the comments. Please also like this video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and also subscribe to our Space Sirens channel so you can watch all our live shows as they happen. You can also follow me on my social media, so I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter, and I'm also on Goodreads, so that will be in the description box for you, and I'll also put the Space Sirens Twitter in there as well, so you can follow us on Twitter and catch up on what we're reading. We're about to put up our poll for our September book in the next couple of days. It might have already gone up by the time I actually edit this. Go and look for that and find out what we're planning to read in September. Yeah, but that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!